So this is a continuation of the previous episode. So if you haven't listened to it, I recommend that you go back to it first. I was just starting to talk about the purpose of life. So let's think about this universe. Every tiny atom of substance in this universe serves a function and serves that function according to very clever laws without fail. They're so clever that there are millions of scientists all over the world working day and night, nonstop, trying to figure out how everything works. Medical scientists, physicists, chemists, hydrologists, meteorologists, botanists, geologists, astronomers. And in spite of the billions of dollars and countless man hours over many centuries by the brightest people here on earth, we barely have scratched the surface of what it takes to make this universe work. As a matter of fact, in spite of our progress, the more we understand what we don't know. And this God, supposedly behind it all, is so clever that we can't even agree that he, she, it exists. He, she, it has hidden him, her, itself from us so cleverly that the only way for any of us now to believe in him, her, it is through faith, not through empirical evidence. We believe some extremely clever being has created this unbelievably complex and diverse universe that functions perfectly down to the subatomic level without pause, and then mysteriously decided to hide him, her, itself from detection by the very experimentation that makes the universe knowable. Our science can't agree or find him, her, it. Our religions can only speculate about the God that created this world, but offer such differing versions that we kill each other over the different stories we've made up about him, her, it. Does this make any sense to you? Really, does this make any sense to you at all? This seems like utter madness to me. There's something really wrong here. So, if there is a God, and this God is so absolutely clever, then why the hell are we here? And where is God? What is this about? Honestly, take the time to repeat this again. What is this all about? Why are we here? Don't these questions seem not only worth examining, but vital to us as the subjects of this plan? Why are we going through this game? And why would a supposedly loving God play this game with us and then hide him, her, itself, hide our purpose, and allow this chaos and pain that ends in our death? It's no wonder there are atheists. Why can't we see him, her, it? What's the purpose of a life of suffering? Are we doing something right now to deserve this? How does the whole thing end? What kind of a God would create a world that contains all of these horrible imperfections? Probably not a perfect God. How much slack do you give God? Or rather, how much slack do you give yourself for not caring or thinking about this? So, do you really believe in God? Or do you just say you do without really being very attached to the idea? Because you can't really reconcile this world, and you feel you're supposed to believe. And most other people say the same thing, so it's the politically correct thing to say. And it's easier to agree to a belief in God than to feel ostracized by society for not believing. Would you believe in God if no one told you about him when you were a kid? Would you have had the insight to make him up? Don't we all believe in the God we were taught to believe in based on the country or culture we were born into and the religious beliefs of our families? You must admit that you could just as easily have been a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Jain if the circumstances of your birth were different. because different ideas would have been drilled into your head from the time you were born. So is your belief in God an honest belief based on real searching and questioning? Or is it an easy belief that you simply accepted because you grew up with it? Again, do you really believe in God? What role does that belief have in your life? What do you do on a daily basis that supports the fact that you believe in God? A God that created you may expect something from you and may be waiting for you to discover the purpose of life so you can really do something with your life that means something. How often do you let that belief in a God slip away as you slip back into a disinterested life, the same as most other people? If you aren't looking for meaning in this life, then you are walking in your sleep. Religious answers from church leaders were created and maintained by well-intentioned, but not very smart or deep-thinking men who were usually very interested in power, money, and position in society, which meant keeping their jobs. And so they crafted their simplistic answers to confuse or control followers. You learn that they allow this and they don't allow that based on the latest moral soundbite, and that's enough for you. You learn what the church thinks by listening to sermons and hearing what your particular church leader says about life, and therefore God. So you end up with a general idea about their idea of God. But specifics are usually rare and changeable. There is generally a lot of contradiction, like an unconditionally loving God who will banish you to all eternity in hell, and unthinkable suffering for calling in sick when you weren't, or kicking your sister when she was 9 or 10. When you look around at the way the world works and the way people treat each other, the way the collective thinking of corporations and governments treat people, and the terrible events that you see every day on the news, do you think that most people around the world truly believe in God? A belief in God doesn't seem to stop people from trying to get their way here on earth, no matter what they have to do to get it. Maybe most people say they believe in God, but that belief requires them to suppress, torture, judge, and persecute others who don't believe the same way they do. Or they don't know what they're supposed to do with their belief, because God seems to be extremely absent. The only directives we have from God are those ancient texts that are confusing, contradictory, judgmental, and painfully outdated. And our vastly different interpretations of them seem to have very little to do with love, tolerance, non-judgment, and all the other nice words that we generously use but don't practice. When we live in this world for a while and see all of this seeming injustice and suffering, we tend to alter our definition of God, as I said before, to describe a being much less kind and loving and a lot more like us. Many of us who have an opinion about God, one way or another, make our views very annoying for others, like this video. There's so much judgment and extremism about what we should believe or not believe that God has become just another commodity, like toilet paper or mouthwash, paraded in countless conflicting, superficial, angry, insubstantial, unofficial advertising campaigns, numbing us to any real meaning. In other words, as far as the choice I said we are all facing today, it doesn't really matter whether you believe in God. It matters how you believe in God. If you believe in God, what is our role in this? In other words, what's the purpose of life? What is behind this universe that we live in, so full of suffering, cruelty, intolerance, and anger, as well as love and kindness? Why was it created? What if God created this world for an entirely different reason than you think? And what if that, in turn, means that the context of your life has just changed dramatically? George Carlin said that maybe this earth allowed humans to evolve because it wanted plastic. And now that we have created plastic for it, it's going to shrug us off like fleas from a dog. He may not be right, but are you? What if this world came about for reasons that you never even thought of? Are you open to something beyond anything you may have heard before? Doesn't the real purpose of life and the real essence of God have a direct effect on you and your behavior? Doesn't a sincere understanding of God change everything? Seriously, what do you think you're doing here? If there is a God, if there really is a God, and if you don't know why we're here and why this was created, then isn't that the most absolutely important thing for you to discover in your life? Think about that. If there is some unseen, omniscient being out there who is responsible for everything about you, created you, watches over you, expects something from you, whatever that may be, then isn't that the most important thing for you to know? Doesn't the answer determine everything about how you live your life? Don't you think it's up to you to do something about it? Doesn't that fill you with a sense of urgency deep in your soul to know something more? If there is a God, then isn't it absolutely up to you to get off your butt and start living life in a way that reflects that there's a God? There's a reason for this. Figure it out. Figure it the hell out. Open your eyes and start looking. If you believe in God, don't you think it should be your primary and only duty to figure out what the heck this is all about? Doesn't that knowledge override everything else that you think is important? It's God, for God's sake. Stop living a life of meaningless, robotic acceptance of the way humans have ruined this planet, the way our institutions, corporations, religions, governments treat people, the meaningless suffering we mete out to each other. This is all wrong, wrong, wrong. There is something much bigger and much different out there. It is the end of suffering. It's up to you, not someone else, to figure it out. For God's sake, get up and do it. You, right now. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have to get to work? Are the kids making noise? Well, it's really not important. Go ahead and forget I said anything. If you don't know the purpose of life, then you don't know anything. Nothing you know means anything. If you don't know the purpose of life, then your life has absolutely no context. A lack of context or a weak or confused context of life is responsible for all the depression and stress and anger and fear in the entire world. If you don't know why you're here, then it stands to reason that every time you take any action or think any thought, that it might be going against your purpose, since you don't know what that purpose is. Why would you spend your entire life fumbling around doing this, doing that, without first knowing why you're doing it? You have to embrace a context for this life before anything positive can happen. Before you can make meaningful decisions or have solid opinions, you must understand how every thought of yours fits into a bigger picture. Otherwise, everything you think is just one more unsubstantiated random thought floating by itself in a confusing, murky ocean. And tomorrow, you'll change your mind as quickly as the wind. If I'm saying that it's our responsibility to step up to the plate and figure out this life, then I must also be saying that it's actually possible to figure it out. Was this created for us to solve somehow? Is it a puzzle that's so clever that God made it to fool us to the fact that it's even a puzzle. You and I know that there are many incredibly smart people on the planet. But what does intelligence have to do with a belief in God or understanding of life? You have to accept the fact that God is way smarter than you, not to mention all of us put together. This is a very clever universe we live in. Maybe the first step to finding out anything is coming to the realization that this is something we're here to figure out, and it's not an intellectual process. There are people who build your cell phone and your TV, all those scientists I was talking about earlier, they're good at it. They know about that stuff. Let them figure it out. Same with God. Let the people on Sunday tell us what we need to know. But this isn't a cell phone or a TV. It's God. And this is about you. Don't you think God wants to be found? And who do you think is going to do that? It's up to you, not religious leaders or philosophers or authors of books. You. The most important question for you to answer is, who am I? Maybe the absolute and only reason we're here is to figure out who we are and why we're here. And every second you spend focused on earthly life, trying to enrich yourself in a vain search for money and happiness, is time sorely wasted. And if you're getting your spiritual teaching from someone who doesn't know why we're here, then I submit to you that person has nothing important to teach you. Now, let's take it to the next level. If God created us and there is a purpose to life, then that purpose is God's purpose. We are here not only to discover that purpose, but to align ourselves with it. God didn't create us with a purpose in mind and then hope that we would stand by disapprovingly and observe it from a distance. We're here to understand it and get on board. We are here to align our desire with God's desire for us. Doesn't that make it even more vital that you find out what that desire may be? If God's desire is for us to reunite with Him, then shouldn't that be our desire? And shouldn't it be our primary and only focus? Being a spiritual person requires being something beyond ritual and showmanship. It requires that you fundamentally change who you are, your thoughts and reactions to your life. If you do not change who you are, then you've done nothing. Have you ever thought for a second that if you are a part of God in some respect, that you really do have access to all the information and answers you need? Do you know that within each one of us, no matter how suppressed it may be, is the desire to know who you are? Your curiosity is fundamental to who you are. Perhaps it was our curiosity that got us into this mess, and maybe it can get us out if we use it correctly. Right now, most of us are squandering or suppressing that curiosity to learn instead about earthly things. What if it's true what most spiritual teachers say, that this earth is just a school? Are you learning anything real or important? Most of us are using our curiosity to delve into the small things in the physical universe that concern us. We want to know about the latest electronic devices and what's going to happen on the next reality show, or how to cook or make tons of money, how to do our jobs, raise our children. As a matter of fact, most of us are much less likely to be interested in any sort of internal soul searching if our external lives are going well. Ultimately, however, all of us will eventually reach the same point in our lives when we realize, as A Course in Miracles says, there must be a better way. And we will all come to the same conclusions about ourselves, because it is inevitable that we will eventually discover who we are. The context of our lives will be seen and understood. God will never force us to learn or do anything because we have incontrovertible free will. But it is also inevitable that we will all eventually learn the truth. So ultimately, and very naturally, we will slowly find all our answers and satisfy all of our curiosities, no matter when we start. So if it's going to happen anyway, why am I getting all bent out of shape now? Because I would like you to consider that we not only have access to all of that information, but the primary reason we are here now alive on this planet is to figure it out. And the bottom line is that the sooner you figure it out, the less suffering you have to undergo. And that is a very important reason. You are here to figure this out and wake up from the stupor of this life that has swindled you out of your inheritance. Maybe you're here to change. Maybe you're here to realize that you're something much better than you thought. Maybe it's not about the actions you take, but the way you think about every single thing that happens to you. Would your reactions to life change if you knew the real purpose of life? Figuring it out may require some large leaps in your thinking. But these leaps are natural, and they can be very scary, but nonetheless, we will all eventually take them. This life on earth should not be taken seriously, but the exit strategy should. Every time you get into any conflict, big or small, with another person, what are you saying about that person on the other end of your behavior? Who are they in relation to you? When we fight wars, who are we killing? Did God create both of you? Are you killing your brothers? Where do you stand with that other soldier? Where does your idea of God go when you're in any kind of a conflict with another human? Is anger okay because everybody else has it? Are yelling and physical superiority the proper solution to problem, like all the action movies you've ever seen? How are you applying any of your beliefs about God to your actual thinking and behavior? Or don't you have to because no one else seems to? We all seem to be in the same habit of reacting angrily to anger and injustice. Does it work? Look at the world for your answer. Now, of course, you don't have to think about God or the meaning of life or anything else of any importance. In fact, most religions are not interested in deep thinking, only in following their vague ideas of worshiping a vague God. The only reason to think differently about God is to bring different results into your life. The ideas you have about God only make a difference if you use those ideas to see things differently, to alter your thinking. Do the ideas most people have about God make this a better world? Are any of us using our knowledge to improve ourselves or to make positive differences in the world, or just to judge our brothers and sisters in an attempt to shame them into compliance with our own intolerant, judgmental, self-righteous, twisted beliefs? Do you think most people really know anything about God? Do you think it's possible that there is anything you could know about God that you don't now know that could make a difference in the quality of your life? Do you think God wants any suffering from you? You may have noticed that I'm not really offering any real answers, and that's intentional. It's because it's not the purpose of this talk. It's to get you to find your own answers. In my upcoming talks, I will offer my own answers, but everyone has to do their own searching. If my answers work for you, that's great. But if they don't, then it's up to you to keep looking. So, after everything I've said and all those questions I've asked, do you think it's possible to believe in a worldly context that makes sense, or that makes God seem like a cool guy? Does it seem possible to accept a God of unconditional love who wants no sacrifices from you and no pain or suffering? I wouldn't have said all of this if I didn't have something good to end with. A Course in Miracles is the only book I have ever found that explains life on earth in a beautiful, life-changing way that happens to include a perfect explanation of suffering and death that also happens to include a God of unconditional love. It turns out he's not a psychopath after all. The Course calls you to action. Reading it is not enough. It is based on a workbook of simple, progressive steps that will slowly help you to break down your preconceived notions of life and help you to transform your thinking into a much more wonderful and profound concept of yourself than you ever thought possible, even if you are already on another spiritual path. The hundreds of pages of text merely explain the workbook, and in so doing, set life on its ear. A Course in Miracles is not another book. It is merely an accurate description of life on earth and beyond, as well as a description of a God that lives up to everyone's best and wildest dreams. It requires us to jump over some daunting mental hurdles that we ourselves have put in place. But we will jump through them, whether we read the Course or not. It's simply a matter of when. Why not now? Get it over with, for God's sake.